An individual took my sister, who was unable to speak, to the bathroom against her will. Upon discovering this, I decided to seek justice with my own hands to achieve the most intense imaginable revenge. Unfortunately, here is how the events unfolded. My younger sister, Holly, is mute. Although she can whisper a bit, it requires considerable effort. Since the age of 5, when she lost the ability to speak in an accident, she has proven to be a beautiful and intelligent child. At the time of the narrated events, Holly was 16 years old, while I was 21. We share an apartment since our mother is a transient person and unfit to care for teenagers. Despite having twin siblings, my sister and my father is distant from the family. Taking responsibility to assist my sister during high school became my mission. I work at an automotive parts transportation company, earning enough to survive given our relatively precarious situation and my sister's inability to speak. At school, Holly faces bullying, which, although usually not a major problem, intensified in the months leading up to these events. Even at 16, repeating the second year of high school due to a failure, she refuses to participate in special education classes, as they did not benefit her before. Her beauty and older age attract the attention of juniors and seniors, predominantly in a negative way. Dio, an 18-year-old senior, stands out in the narrative as someone who treats Holly very well. His presence deters bullies from bothering her, as Dio is tall, handsome, and intimidating. I avoid intervening as my sister shows happiness in his presence. However, a few months later, Holly stops coming home happy, indicating that something has changed in her relationship with Dio. Despite my questions, she remains silent. When confronting him, Dio avoids the subject, increasing my suspicions. Concerned for Holly, I consult her counselor and assistant principal at school. I discover that she continues to spend her free time with Dio, which seems strange as she no longer shows happiness. The illegal phase of the investigation begins. I invite them to dinner at Olive Garden, where I perform illegal actions such as stealing Dio's phone, whose password I know, and reading his messages in search of answers. Although I'm not exactly sure what I'm looking for, I find out that he consumes alcohol and drugs with friends on weekends, information that will become relevant. A few days later, upon finding his phone in the laundry, I suggest that it may have accidentally fallen into one of our coats. Although I am sure he has retrieved it, he thanks me for returning Holly. Still not satisfied with the evidence, I return to school and, using his previous texts as a reference, examine the CCTV recordings for suspicious activities. There was nothing suspicious, considering the school's standards. However, something caught my attention: my sister heading towards the central bathroom, and him heading towards the men's bathroom about a minute later. The bathrooms are separated by a wall, but there's a custodial closet that opens to both and is completely out of reach of security cameras. At that moment, I began to suspect that something was happening between them. The specific bathroom in question was the only one with such a closet, and if my memory serves me right, the closet didn't have a proper lock, only locked from the outside on both sides. That's when the boiling point began. Confronting Holly about it, she started crying. After consoling her for 15 minutes, she signaled to me, trembling, something that made my blood boil. It seemed to be much worse than I had imagined. Initially, I thought they might be using substances or something of the sort, given the type of person Dio seemed to be. However, according to Holly, one day he took her there, and what happened was indescribable. He threatened her, saying he would hurt her if she told anyone because she couldn't scream for help or make any loud noise. Moreover, he threatened her to meet him there every 2 days. I was furious. My first instinct was to call the police, but I realized there would be no evidence, only the testimony of a mute girl. I wouldn't trust police intervention anyway. The first thing I did was call the school, claiming a family emergency and authorizing a week of absence for Holly. Then, I found out where Dio lived and planned the most brutal revenge possible. The first step was to break into his house. I knew his parents were frequently out, and he went out to smoke and drink with friends. From reading his messages, I found out there was a spare key on the balcony. On a Saturday, when everyone was out, I initiated the first phase of my revenge. I entered through the back door, found his room, broke his computer, stole his wallet, urinated on his bed, and hid some bags of illicit substances in his house. To avoid raising suspicions, I disposed of the remaining evidence throughout the house. I didn't steal anything. Next, I went to a Starbucks and, using his debit card, bought various obscene items in his name, having them sent to his house. I left his wallet near a homeless person sleeping on a park bench. I contacted his parents, informing them that I saw their son involved in questionable activities with a group of teenagers, leaving them furious. Finally, I waited for Dio on his way back home, as I discovered from a message from one of his friends. I waited for 2 hours in the bushes, wearing sunglasses and a hooded sweatshirt. I jumped on him, demanding money and his phone, even though I knew he wasn't carrying his wallet. I kept one hand in the hoodie pocket, pointing at him as if I had something on me. He believed it, handed over the phone, and ran away. I completed my plan using his phone, for which I still had the password, to send an email to the school from the school's email. In the email, I confessed what he had done to my sister in the custodial closet several times, as well as possessing substances on school grounds and getting drunk while underage. I placed his phone on my knee and went home. The result of what happened was that my sister returned to school the following Monday, armed with a pepper spray I bought for her. Dio wasn't at school, and she was called in by the counselor. She confessed, and he was fully charged for what he did to her and the illegal possession of substances. Furthermore, his parents disowned him entirely, and he was expelled from school. Unfortunately, this story doesn't have a completely happy ending. All this ordeal left Holly in a downward spiral. Her grades dropped, and she barely smiled. In March 2018, she attempted self-harm, and it was sheer luck that I found her in time. She is getting better now, but the emotional trauma will likely affect her for the rest of her life. I pray to any gods out there that he experiences his own medicine in prison. This story is beyond horrible. There isn't even a way to describe how terrible this is, and no amount of revenge faced by this guy will ever undo the horror that was done to his sister. This is one of those situations where sharing an intense and terrible story like this can end up helping someone who has gone through something similar and is trying to cope with themselves facing something so serious. What would you do if you found out your loved one, unable to defend themselves, was in such a situation? Finally, I mentioned that I am the idiot for kicking out my sister and her daughters after they hid my wife's wig and embarrassed her. I want to start by mentioning that my wife is a cancer patient, and unfortunately, she started losing hair due to chemotherapy, becoming incredibly insecure about it. Her lack of hair, in particular, deeply affects her. She got a wig and started wearing it, and I support her 100%. She only wears it around family and friends. My sister, after a complicated divorce, moved in with her twin daughters almost a month ago. Things were going well, except for my niece's constant comments about my wife's wig. They became obsessed, asking many questions and even suggesting trying it on. This got tiring, and they even pressured to see her without the wig. My wife felt uncomfortable and refused. Yesterday, I came home and found out that she had locked herself in the room and was crying. I asked what happened, and she told me she woke up and couldn't find the wig. So I found out that my nieces took and teased my wife. They asked her to leave so they could see her without the wig. My wife repeatedly asked for it back, but they started laughing and recording. My wife had to lock the door to keep a distance because they wouldn't stop. I was furious. I went to the kitchen and confronted them. They acted confused, but I managed to retrieve the wig. I scolded them, saying they humiliated my wife and embarrassed her by taking off her wig. They claimed it was just a playful joke, which made me go off on them. My sister got involved and said my wife was being too sensitive. The girls were just curious to see her without the wig, but she overreacted. I told her that her daughters were recording, and she didn't see anything wrong with it. I also overreacted and lost control, telling her that she and my nieces were no longer welcome in my house and needed to leave. Later, I informed them about the eviction, as they thought I wasn't serious, and they started crying, begging me to let it go. But my wife no longer feels comfortable around them after what they did. My sister called our elderly father, and he begged me to let them stay, insisting that my nieces were just acting like typical teenagers. He offered to talk to my wife, but I refused. They kept pleading, but I continued to refuse. So, I'm the idiot. What a strange and sadistic way to have fun, humiliating the operator's wife. Maybe these two girls don't care at all about this woman's suffering or life or death, but I'm sure they would feel very different if it were someone they cared about, like their mother, for example. They probably wouldn't have this cruelty of trying to induce her to expose herself so they could record it. The sister and the elderly father don't see how wrong this is, which makes it seem like they either don't fully understand the situation or simply don't have enough empathy to care and understand how wrong it was. The two daughters are basically little bullies who do what they want, wanting no one to stop them. This was the breaking point where they took everything to the extreme. Now, this is your loved one, and someone did this to them. Let me know what you would do in the comments below. An idiot or not, an idiot, and why I'm the idiot for getting angry with my husband because he laughed when I told him to reheat his own dinner. To contextualize, I am a homemaker with two children, one 3 years old and one 6 months old. My husband is an ambulance driver, works odd hours, and comes home unexpectedly. He expects dinner or lunch to be ready whenever he comes home, whether I'm sleeping or busy with the kids. This is tiring, but I do it because I know how hard he works. After struggling with this for a long time, my mother suggested that I start pre-preparing meals so that dinner or lunch can be ready when he's home, and all he needs to do is just reheat it. Immediately, I took the advice and went shopping, spending 2 whole days preparing meals and storing them in the fridge. His response to this idea was anything but appreciative. I was kind of relieved because now I could sleep well, the kids wouldn't be disturbed, etc. While last night, at 11 p.m., he came home while I was asleep after putting the baby to bed. I woke up to him shouting from the living room. I rushed out and asked what was happening. He told me he was hungry and wanted dinner. I told him it was in the fridge, and he just needed to reheat it. He insisted I go there and reheat it for him. I said no, it's not going to happen, and he needs to reheat his own dinner. He started sarcastically laughing, which made me angry. He then said it was ridiculous to assume that, after working tirelessly for an entire shift, he should do the simple task of reheating dinner himself, especially when I'm home and could do it. The argument began as he complains that I'm not doing enough, and I refuse to warm it up. I go back into the room and close the door. An hour later, he returns shouting about how I basically made him almost faint from hunger just because I'm petty trying to prove a point. I tell him it's irrational to expect me to warm up his dinner when he could do it himself. He gives me an unpleasant look and says he's going to bed hungry, and it's my responsibility. Then he leaves. This morning, he gets dressed quietly and leaves. Turning off the phone was a foolish move. I think this is one of those situations where the husband isn't enjoying his job, it's probably very stressful, and he's building resentment for having to do this work while seeing that his wife is living a more relaxed life. This resentment may lead to the idea that the least she could do is warm up his food, and he probably feels it's so obvious that it doesn't need to be said. However, for her, raising children is already a challenging task, and waking up in the middle of the night to reheat food makes the situation even more difficult. It seems like the solution she found is reasonable, but from his perspective, this is the least she could do. He is expressing his frustration in a disrespectful and unloving way. Seeking neutral professional assistance might be necessary to address this situation. His behavior is disrespectful and needs to be addressed so that both can find a healthier solution for their dynamics and communication in the relationship. You need help because this kind of behavior doesn't improve on its own, and there is a lot of support in this response because it's basically what seems to be the perspective we show here. I can't see how this would resolve itself, but how do you see it? What would you do if you were in this situation? Let me know below. An idiot or not, idiot, and why am I the idiot for not returning to my job of taking care of children because the mother fired me over a mistake? I'm a 19-year-old and had a job taking care of 2 children, a 2-year-old boy, a 3-year-old girl, and a dog. I worked part-time for 4 days a week for a single mother who got my contact information from a business card I posted in my father's pediatric therapy office. Since the weather started to warm up, the dog has been shedding fur intensely. I tried vacuuming the sofa, but the next day it seemed like I hadn't done anything. One day, while the children were napping, I spent about an hour brushing the dog outside. He seemed to enjoy it, and by the end, there was a huge pile of brushed fur. I sent the mother a message that I thought would be funny, saying that I brushed a completely new dog out of the old dog's coat. However, the mother was furious. She called screaming, saying that I was causing harm to the dog by brushing it and that I was an idiot. She expressed distrust for entrusting her children to me and declared that it would be my last day. I was extremely upset because I had been with the family for 3 months, and she had never yelled at me before. As soon as she got home, still angry, I left and got a new job with another family, starting the following Monday. 2 days later, the mother who yelled at me called apologizing for the misunderstanding and the dismissal. I told her I was no longer available, and she started crying, mentioning how difficult it was to find a new babysitter for her special needs children. She tried to involve my father, asking him to intervene. Despite respecting my decision, my father suggested that I continue taking care of her children for a short period to keep the peace. I hate putting someone in an awkward position, but I also don't want to work for someone like that. I am an idiot, yes, for not consulting the mother before brushing the dog. However, her reaction was totally exaggerated. Now, the father is involved in the situation, probably honestly explaining to her what happened, but she continues to act strangely. Let me know what you would do in this situation. Thank you so much for watching until the end of this video on my AITA channel. If you enjoyed the shared stories, please share with your friends and family. Don't forget to subscribe, leave your like, and turn on the notification bell to not miss any future content. Your participation is crucial for the channel's growth. Until next time.